Hello and welcome back to Well That Aged Well. And this week we always have a reason to celebrate, and this week we are celebrating episode 200, and by that we are doing drunk history because it's we always have like I said we always have a reason to celebrate, and we have the brilliant. She's a third time on this podcast, and always as I always say, third time is a charm. So we please welcome
Mm.
back Eleanor Janega, and welcome back
Hello.
Eleanor. What are you drinking tonight?
Tonight I am drinking gin in a tin, as we
Nice,
say in
nice.
Britain. So premixed gin and tonics. It's not medieval, it's early modern, but guess what? It's the year of our Lord 2024, and I'm worth it. I'm worth it.
Hey, there you go, Joe. And I'm, of course, paying homage to my half Danish heritage, so I'm drinking Carlsberg. And I
Woo!
encourage you to grab a drink with us because this is going to be a fun episode, and I mean fun. We're mainly going to discuss medieval history because that's kind of your thing. But and I want to begin with the because we're drinking, I feel it's appropriate to begin with the alcohol consumption in the Middle Ages. So let's begin a little bit talking about how alcohol was consumed and what the
Mm.
reason behind, and of course talk about the alcohol distribution and consumption in the Middle Ages.
Yeah, so I get asked about this a lot. Because there's a lot of misunderstanding about it. First of all, everybody calm down about mead.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I need everybody like mead is not that widely drunk. Like it definitely exists. You're thinking about Norse mythology. That's why you're thinking about mead. And I don't know if you know this, but the North Pantheon is not real. And also
Oh no, you don't
like
say.
I know. And also the Norse Pantheon isn't even about regular people, it's about gods. So if they're drinking mead in huge quantities, it's because they are gods and can do that, right? Like I'm not saying that mead isn't drunk. I'm just saying that it's not that much of a feature of medieval life. So shut up. Second of all, like the big thing that I get asked about all the time is about like how people are always drinking beer because they're like, yeah, yeah, well, everybody's drunk. And it's like, okay, first of all, no. Because actually, what everybody's drinking, well, first of all, it's not beer, it's ale. Like you get beer in the late medieval period. The difference there being whether or not there's hops in it. And hops are introduced in the later medieval period in order to keep beer fresh longer. So ale usually doesn't have hops, and usually the inclusions in it, like alongside, your mash and barley and blah blah blah. It's usually like whatever herbs you got around the shop. Like, I mean, what's outside? Yeah, throw that in. Like, oh baby, it's mugwort time. Whatever. So, but what they're drinking when they drink ale most of the time is they're drinking small ale. So this has like almost no alcohol in it. Like it might have 2%, but they're not like so stupid that they're like, "Oh yeah, hell yeah, I simply love to get drunk and then plow." Like I'm
Yeah.
going to take this team of oxen that like,
Yeah.
this thing that
That's
is going to
drug flow, baby.
yeah, woo! Like, I mean, they're not out here drinking and plowing, right? Like they know that their ability to last through the winter is gonna depend on this, right? So they're gonna do it.
Yeah.
So they're drinking ale all the time because they need more calories. Because they work outside, they do a lot of heavy work, and it's just like a way of getting more calories into your body. These people do not diet in that way. Like, I mean, they do diet, but usually for medical reasons. Um, they're not worried about putting on extra weight. They are worried about having enough energy. So they're drinking small beer all the time. They're also all like making their own regular ass beer, and they will drink like ale when they knock off work. You know, or like maybe even like in the later time, you might have like one cheeky stronger ale, like when you know that it's like winding down time, right? So there's a lot of that around the shop. I'm also bringing up the reason they drink it because a big reason that people think people drink it is they're like, oh, because the water wasn't safe to drink.
Yeah.
And that's not true. Like, usually everybody understands like the importance of keeping drinking water clean. And so like there are laws, for example, like all these myths about medieval people just like throwing sewage in the street and things like that. That is not real. Like there are laws in all cities and towns about how you dispose of sewage. Like they're not nasty people. They've got ways of managing this stuff. And especially if you're like in the countryside or whatever, you're just going to whatever stream or well or whatever it is you have. And like that's not going to be infected with, sewage. So, they're drinking beer because they like it, and also it's fun and cool, right?
Yeah.
They do be getting drunk,
Mm.
to be clear.
Yeah.
Like, for a holiday or whatever, and like on it, they go to bed pretty early, so you can just kind of start hammering it the minute like the sun goes down, because you're gonna be asleep soon anyway. So like that's
Yeah.
all chill. So they definitely do a lot of that. Now, also wine occurs if you're a fancy
Mm.
lad indeed. All over Europe, fancy lads be drinking wine. But then, of course, like in places where they're practicing viticulture, it's also more common. So, like
Mm.
around the Mediterranean littoral, in France, places like that, they're absolutely getting after it with wine
Yeah.
as well. So, like it might be like a really rare resource in Sweden or England or places like that. But like, anyone can kind of have wine in Italy. No one cares,
Mm.
right? Like
And
it's not like,
I want to ask about the wine because I don't know if you know. I know it's not your area, but in Mongol society, right, they watered down the wine, and as it
mhm.
kind of in ancient times. So even if they drank a lot of wine, it wasn't necessarily alcoholism because they drank because it was watered down. Was this a thing in medieval Europe as well? Did it where the wine watered down? Like
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah, they absolutely did. Like, unless it's like you knew you were at a really good party if they weren't watering down the wine. Like, so at dinner or whatever, when you had wine, you're watering it down. But then if it's like Easter Sunday, you're like, boom, 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 like one time, like it's about to get big out here. So it's like it's kind of like the same thing as the small ale, heavy ale distinction, right? It's that like you'll cut it just to save money because you know the things are tight. And also, you might want a glass of wine at lunch, but again, you've got a plow, so
Yeah.
like, you're not gonna get too drunk, right? Yeah.
Where hangover? I assume hangover was a thing back then as well, right? Like
Oh
it
yeah,
was.
yeah. Oh
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
I don't feel like flowing today. Oh my god.
Yeah, like and I think that there is a fair amount of understanding of that. There's like some, okay, yeah, whatever, you got to get through it, but there's also some like, all right, Lars, go lay down happening, kind
Mm.
of a deal.
I don't know if you've seen. It's kind of not really medieval, but I don't know if you've seen the show 1776 on Netflix, the Polish show.
I have
It
not.
is. There's a joke there where the village drunkard he is getting sober, and everyone is encouraging him to get drunk again because he is so
He's
boring
like the
when
life
he's
of the party.
sober. Yeah, he's so he's so boring when he's sober. So the guy that he's a total tool, but the guy's leader is encouraging him to drink again, and
Love
he's
it.
in the end of setting fire to the grain supply that they're supposed to ship out. So it kind of backfires. But it's kind of late or
Whoa.
early modern, but it's because of 1776. But still, it's such a. I feel like that kind of applied to the medieval era as well. Kind of.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, there's like, how are you gonna get your fun if nobody's drunk, right? Like, where's
Mm,
the drama coming from? Honestly,
yeah.
like, which is also why you see like a lot of like speaking against
Yeah.
the drink that happens. Like, not always, but often. And certainly temperance is considered a virtue.
Mm,
And of course, there are all kinds of worries about drinking too much. Like drinking too much and like enjoying stuff from the normal world too much is often like, that kind of falls under
mm,
luxuria or lust. And there's this idea that if you're enjoying the physical things of life
yeah.
too much, whether that's like drink or food or nice clothes, like fancy things, everyone's
Yeah.
like, "Are you being sexy?
Mm,
Is this about sex?" Like
yeah.
the church was constantly like, "I bet this is about being slutty," right?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, nah, man, I just really like wine. And it's like, no, 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 you can't
Mm,
really just like wine. You're doing it most lustfully. So there's also like a lot of worry about that. And I mean, drunk people do be making a fool of themselves. So,
mm.
that's there as well.
What was a shameful if you were kind of were a village drunk and fool in a way? Was that
Oh
very
yeah.
shameful?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you probably had one, but it's kind of like
Oh no, that's my dad. He's drunk again.
yeah, it's like So usually what it ends up being is a critique of one's masculinity,
Yeah.
right? Like as these things so often are. So it's like, oh, like when we're saying, oh, people can't handle their drink.
Yeah.
It'll be like, you lack sufficient masculinity to understand when you should stop doing this thing. And that is also hooked into, the ideas about lustfulness, right? Because to be lustful is to be feminine.
Mm.
So whether it's like a lust for
Don't
wine
consider
or
me a feminist.
I know, right? That's right. So, it's kind of like, oh, well, this is if you were a real man, you would know when to quit, kind of a thing. So there's certainly stigma attached to it, but also fundamentally, if he's your drunk, then you own him, right? And it's like the communities really look after one another and they're really connected to each other. So that makes rather a large difference.
How did the
So like,
church?
go ahead.
How did the church feel about it? Because we gotta bring those guys in too, of course. How did the church feel about drinking and socializing?
Yeah, they're not big fans of it, like because they're worried that too much drinking and socializing and like carousing, then it leads to other sins, right? Like it's
Oh,
unruly behavior. And it's the unruliness that is the worry there. So they have a vested interest in kind of keeping things calm, because like calmness leads to collecting money.
yeah.
And also like drunkenness can lead to any other sin, so not just lust but wrath. That's a problem. So it's like drunk fights are a real concern, especially when communities, yeah, you need to get up and plow. What happens if like the lads are just out punching each other all the time, right? Like
Mm,
that can be a real issue. So there is, of course, a need for everyone to be fit for work
mm,
on a regular basis. So if these things are going to lead to bodily harm, not just social harm or religious harm, then that's a real problem for the church.
mm,
They need to consider that, because they're kind of like the ones who are keeping things ticking over out in the countryside, right? It's like these rules that establish how it is that societies run.
mm. Um, what about women and alcohol? Where women were fairly mostly the sober ones, or were they allowed to drink and as well? How
No,
were drunk women viewed?
they're also drinking. They're also usually the ones making the alcohol. I mean, like especially when it comes to ale and beer, like that's a woman's job. And so like the brewing process is expressly feminine, right?
Mm,
Now that doesn't mean they're the only ones drinking it, but they're also drinking it. Like let's be so real, right? I mean, and we also have this term like alewife, right? And now alewives are usually seen as being like quite bawdy,
mm,
like they're fun time girls. Like, the girls who are
yeah.
making a lot of money off of ale, they're like, way hey, right? Like lads, kind of a deal. And so they're considered like quite fun, but also you're meant to understand that they are kind of stepping outside of the
Mm,
bonds of acceptable femininity,
mm,
right? Because acceptable femininity is certainly not carousing,
mm,
right? Like acceptable femininity is 100% like meek and indoors, and I mean we're not as indoors as it is now, mind, but you want very much women who can hold themselves in,
yeah.
as it were, because the worry is that they're going to get sexy at any moment. So you don't worry about
Yeah.
violence, but you worry about them getting sexy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to ask, were the women like you see in modern nightclub that were, I'll do forgive me, I don't want to get cancelled, but I don't use the word anyway. When I kind of slutty women out there, and when they just,
Oh yeah, like so we see it.
hey, yo, yeah, what you now? And then she went on the next guy, and then where the nightclub, to call them nightclub girls, where did that kind of girls as well in the medieval era?
Oh yeah, like those girls are out there, and like there's a lot of worry about that, right? Like, and there's a lot of like, how do we classify women like that? Like,
Mm,
good time girls is a real, it's a real concern,
mm,
because it's like if they're having it off with lots of different guys, like what does this all mean, right? Now, granted, for peasants, it means a lot less.
Yeah.
Like nobody cares what peasants are doing. They're like, yeah, have fun, right? Like, but it's much more like for the middle class up, where it's like you absolutely cannot do that. But we definitely know that girls like that exist, and there's a lot of hand wringing, like on the part of church people, where they're like, what do we do about it? And how do we? They want to quantify it.
Yeah.
That's the thing. As they're like, I don't understand if this is a sex worker or like what this is or what it means. Right? Like, what do you do about this? And so they're constantly like writing about it, and which I think is just an excuse to think about sexy girls. But hey ho.
That and we discussed this kind of last time when we mentioned sex work. It was kind of organized in the Middle Ages, right? Like it was actually the church sometimes supported it because they knew that men had this sexual desire that they wanted.
Yeah. And I mean, and it's very much imagined very expressly as violent, right? Like, so men's sexuality is kind of seen as incandescent. And the issue here is they think that like men's sexuality needs to be like slaked, and there needs to be like a pressure release for it, and that's really how they see it, as like a form of pressure, right? So like especially in cities, you're gonna have some form of sex worker, because again, like good time girls, you're supposed to be like, no, stop that, girls, stop being fun, and like you can't do that, right? So you're gonna have to
I'm
have
sorry for interrupting you again, but were the penance if you were kind of like if you were a good time Joe, were the penance if you were
oh
caught in
yeah,
church?
they're like, the penance is like, it's like for a simple fornication, it's usually like a year of fasting. It's like no big deal. And
It wasn't like some
oftentimes,
whipping kind of like I
no,
don't
like,
know, yeah.
yeah, like oftentimes what it is like a big one that they'll try to get you to do is marry the latest guy you shagged. Like that's usually like the big one where they're like, just get married and knock it off.
Yeah.
Stop. And then it's usually fasting. Like most penances are just fasting. There's not very much whipping at all whatsoever. When we see whipping enter the conversation, it's usually like secular people doing it to themselves.
Yeah.
And the church is usually like, knock that off, dude. You're being weird. Like, put
I
that
can't help
whip
but
down.
some actually liking it, that BDS kind of way. Like, oh
Yeah,
no, I
yeah.
need to punish myself.
Oh, but yeah. And like, okay.
Oh no.
And we certainly see whipping as a punishment, but that's usually a secular punishment. And sometimes it gets applied specifically like to sex workers, like if they're working in the wrong part of town,
Yeah.
right? Like if they're not working in what we would call a red light district, then you can get in trouble, and then they'll whip you and take you to the place where you should be working, which is usually like near the city walls, outside the city walls. Like, I mean, usually you're working in an area that's too highfalutin, like it's too fancy, and we can't have sex work there. And then secular authorities will whip you. Now, the church itself for sex workers, they are again like, just please get married. Just please get married and knock this off. And then if like later in the medieval period, you have like the groups like the Magdalens who come up, where it's like you could also be a nun
Yeah.
if you wanted to. And they're much harder on the Magdalens than they are on like other groups of nuns. So for example, you see a lot more corporeal punishment within the Magdalens than you do in other groups of nuns. So you will see more whipping there.
Yeah.
But they are unable to prescribe bodily harm for people if it's not within a religious order. Right. So it's like, you got to be in the club for them to whip you. They can't just be like, you can't just like whip Jenny. Right.
Yeah.
Like that. She's fine, kind of a deal. So, yeah, like you have like sex work in most major cities. Usually, like in the Holy Roman Empire, it's usually municipal. Like you'll have a charter from the town that says you're allowed to run a brothel. And then it's like within these brothels, you can do what you want. Now, there's plenty of girls who are like working not in brothels, and they're kind of like working for themselves, and you can get in trouble for that. But there's still tons of them, and we know that. And those girls are oftentimes like the good time girls as well. Like those girls are down the ale hall. They are down the ale hall all the time. And then people are like, oh, there's sex workers working in the ale hall, and they're not supposed to work in the ale hall.
Oh no.
And stuff like that. And so like, they'll be narcs about it.
Yeah.
But then the church is always just like, chase them off. Just tell them that they can't come around here no more. Like it's not considered like, oh, this is like grievous. It's like, yeah, well, tell them to knock it off, right? Like, Go in there with a spray gun like they're a bad cat or
Yeah.
something. Be like, pss, 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 out, pss, you know, kind of.
What about the? I know you mainly focus on peasant and not the upper class, but I want to talk about a little bit about because mostly in movies, right? We see the upper class and we see the medieval court having parties and all that kind of thing. What about alcohol consumption and everything in parties in the medieval ages? Because as we know in, for example, and this is not about the upper class, but to do an example, in the Viking society, if you threw up, you were considered a hero among, and now someone was in London, I kind of threw up in them too, but I don't think I was considered a hero then. In Viking society,
Yeah,
you were
yeah.
considered kind of a stud if you threw up and while you were drinking. But what about the upper class when it comes to alcohol and feast?
So
Like
they
again, like
drink a
we see in
lot.
movies.
Yeah.
What we see in the movies, especially TV series.
Well, they drink a lot because they can,
Yeah.
because they don't have real jobs. You know, like their job is bossing people around. So like, when I'm like, well, they water down the wine at lunch. It's like the rich people are not watering down the wine. Like, they're just like they are going for it. So we see we see a lot of drinking up there. Now, the vomiting is not going to pass in
Yeah.
like the context of court life. However, there are still people who like have a reputation for drunkenness, and like then who knows what they are up to.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we see a lot, like for example in courtly love literature, is there's like a lot of warning dudes against getting too drunk because they're like, well, you're scaring the hoes, right? Like ladies don't like it if you're too drunk. You gotta like drink the right amount in order for women to find you sexy. So again, it's like that manliness thing. Like show that you're enough of a man to like balance it out without looking too wild with it. And that kind of shows you also how like affairs are conducted at court, right? Because it's like you're not going to want to get with a guy who's super super drunk all the time because you're not going to be able to trust him to keep secrets.
Yeah.
So it's like if you're trying to get with someone outside the bonds of wedlock and you're rich people, they have got to be able to keep it the fuck down, right? Like you cannot, like this cannot get out. And so you're not going to shag a dude who's drunk all the time because who knows what he's saying to who, right? And then you're in trouble, right?
Hey,
So
so
yeah,
I heard this about that guy.
yeah, yeah. So you don't want that, right? You
Yeah.
absolutely don't want that.
Uh, something I want to talk about because we kind of discussed this off the record as well when in a private conversation, and I want to discuss this as well because I feel like we should bring this up in when the king, right, medieval or even early modern, up to what I believe fairly recently, when the king, because we always read about the king had so many concubines, so he had so many
Yeah.
sexual liaisons, and I want to bring this up because I think it's important to think about. And the woman in this scenario, because no one speaks about the woman or maid who is the sexual concubine of the king, and they didn't really have much choice. They couldn't really say no, could they? Like consent
Yeah.
with that thing. Like even if what like the king says, oh, she looks fine, I want her. Like you couldn't really say no, could you? So even when you see about the king boasting about his sexual liaisons, the woman really didn't really have much choice in the matter.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, right? Because like you're gonna have more say in this. Like, I mean, obviously you can't just shag any queen or like
Yeah.
princess or something. Like, there's gonna be people who are outside of this, but then there's a time when that kind of cuts off, and I would say it's kind of like lower nobility and below. It's like, yeah, good luck, buddy, because like, what are you gonna do? And now there are legends about this, right? So like, William the Conqueror's father, was a noted ladies' man. And his mom, Herleva, like the legend is that his dad saw Herleva down by the well outside of Falaise Castle and basically like pointed to his servants and was like, go get her. I'm going to shag her. Right.
Yeah.
Like, see her, go get her.
Me too was
And
nothing yet.
no. And so like basically his retainers go down there or whatever. And they're like, come on, lady, you're going to go shag the king.
Yeah.
And she is like, no, if you want to shag this, I get to come through the front gate, like riding on a horse, like I'm
Yeah.
a lady. And she doesn't like ask to be wed, but she asks for kind of like the official position of concubine,
Mm.
as opposed to it's like, so that's like the level that regular women could ask for. They're like, yeah, but I don't want to do it in private, right? Like it's got to be much more official than that. Having said that, this is of course like a legend, and whether or not any of it happened at all is like, it could be a way of basically saying that, oh, so, yeah, like William the Conqueror, he's born out of wedlock, but she's not just any slag off the street, right? Like this
Yeah.
is a woman who knew to like stand up for herself. Like that's one way of looking at it. However, I think also when we talk about William the Conqueror being born out of wedlock, and they're like, oh, he was called William the Bastard. Dude, Normans did not care about that shit.
Yeah.
Like at all. And pretty much all Normans,
It was
especially
all,
the
and sorry to interrupt you, and we discussed
yeah.
this with Mark Morris as well. That
Mm,
it was only William himself who really was concerned about this, because when he conquered England, it wasn't kind of
yeah.
legitimacy, because the English
Mhm.
were kind of more concerned about this, that he was a bastard, but and
Yeah,
he wanted a more legitimacy to his rule, because he was a bastard in Normandy, but nobody cared there. But in over the Channel, people kind
yeah,
of
it was
cared,
more of an
but
English thing. Yeah, it was more of an
yeah.
English problem than a Norman problem because the Normans, what they'd been doing for a few generations was you would marry a French duchess and he'd be like, there's my wife, everybody. But then
Mm.
you'd have a Norman concubine and your kids with your Norman concubine were the ones who inherited, right? And it
Yeah.
was like, and nobody cared. And like that was just kind of like how things were. So it's like us projecting back from William
Yeah.
about that. But like, yeah, I mean, if we think about the really famous concubines, like I don't know, Henry II's Rosalind, for
Mm.
example, it's like, I mean, what if really, I mean, and she got a pretty good deal out of it. She was celebrated, everybody loved her, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, how much say did she really have? I mean, how do you say no to Henry II,
Yeah.
right? Like it's very you usually have to start a civil war over it.
Yeah.
Right? It's just like if you don't have the ability to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
speaking of
yeah.
Henry II, and we kind of discussed this again the last time as well. And I should promote this, by the way. I forgot to do this in the intro. We discussed it when we discussed about the ones and future steps at the end, which I'm calling your parents. Sorry. Yeah, and we discussed this topic the last time you were here. But Eleanor of sorry, Eleanor of Aquitaine, not Eleanor Janega.
Mhm.
But she kind of talked about we talked about how she had like one or two affairs maybe, but and it
Mhm.
was suddenly she was cancelled, to use a modern term, by the chronicles. But it's of Henry II. He had all these affairs with all these women, and he
Yeah,
is a
like, and
stud.
totally
Like,
openly, and
because
totally
Eleanor
openly.
had one or two affairs, she's called a slut,
Yeah,
and
yeah, and we don't even know who she was theoretically shagging,
yeah,
right? It's like, I mean, and they're like, yeah, Saladin, like, bro, she was not shagging Saladin,
yeah, yeah.
right? And if she was shagging Saladin, that'd be cool as hell. They're like her uncle, and I'm like, I just don't buy it, dude. This
I
is
mean,
not
wasn't he
House of the
11 at the
Dragon.
time when she was in the
Yeah,
Second Crusade?
it's like I just don't think that that's what happened, right? And it's like, do I think that she was totally celibate from the time that she separated from Henry
Yeah,
II? I do not.
yeah.
No, but we don't know enough about
I mean, she was hot.
she was hot, she was powerful, she was rich, she ran her own court, she could do what she wants, right?
Yeah,
And but the thing is, she was so smart that it's like we can't tell you who she was shagging, and it's like
yeah,
she gets in trouble. Meanwhile, Henry's like, everyone, here's my girlfriend, and
yeah,
everyone is like, what a guy,
yeah,
legends only, and they're like,
yeah,
okay, sure, bro, sure, yeah. Or like even fucking Richard the Lionheart, who everybody loves, right? Never got
yeah.
married, bastard kids, and everyone's like, oh, God, Richard,
Mm.
what's he like?
Man mean man.
Yeah, like, and that's all completely fine, you
Yeah,
know. We would not be the first people to point out how sexism is ridiculous and stupid,
yeah.
but there you go, there you go.
Mm. Speaking of Richard, by the way, and
Mm,
we discussed this a while ago, and I know you know him quite well, Matthew Lewis, when we spoke about the rise of the
hmm
Plantagenets. And how do you feel about him? Like, do you think he was a good king, or do you think he was a terrible king? Because I mean, from my point of view, it was a terrible one because he taxed England twice. He bankrupted England twice. He would sell London if he found the highest bidder, if he found someone who was willing to. He was a terrible husband, and he pissed everyone off during his time of crusade. So I mean, think I kind of made a point, but what are your thoughts? Do you think he was a how do you feel about him being
I kind of like
a
him.
king?
Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like all of
And of course, the massacre of Acre.
yeah, don't love that. Don't love that. But I mean, we gotta understand that like a cab with a K, all kings are bastards,
Yeah.
right? Like, there are no good kings.
Yeah.
You can't be. But I think he inherited a really fucking difficult set of circumstances, post anarchy. And it's like, yeah, haha, everyone, just forget about that. Like, England's back together again. Don't ask any questions. It's like, let's move forward. And the finances were already in a bad state of affairs from that because of like all of the infighting.
Yeah.
And I think that he did what I would do, which is I would pay more attention to the French lands where there's a lot more money. And like, I mean, who gives a fuck what's happening in England? That's not like boring. Like it's the only reason we pay attention to English history the way we do at all whatsoever is the same reason you and I are speaking English right now, which is, just the modern period and empire, right? England was not fucking important in the medieval period. It was not. Like, I mean, sure, yeah, we're a king. Good job.
Don't you miss the good old days when they weren't thinking about colonialism and just fighting each other?
Yeah, right. Like, I mean, just get these people out of my face and let them fight each other. But yeah, like, I mean, this was a place for sheep, right? This is where you kept the sheep. And that's not to say that London wasn't important. London was very important because that's where you buy the wool from. And like, that's important, but that doesn't make England important. So, he's fucking off to France and, more power to him. I would too. You're like, yeah, catch a girl like in Picardy, all right? Like, I don't know. So I think that basically, I'm kind of pro Henry, but not like all the way. Like I think I'm slightly more pro than con on the on the meter. So I'm maybe like a 6.5 out of 10. If 10 is good all the way.
I'd rather say 4 because Massacre of Acre kind of brings him a little bit
down.
No,
yeah, that's
and he bankrupted England twice. So
I think it's cool to bankrupt England. I'd do it right now if I could, like
I mean, the Tories already have, so
I mean, it's like, what's new, brah? What's new? Like, that's just how it be around here. So, yeah.
I asked this a lot of times, but so for people who didn't listen to, if there is anyone who listens to every episode that I've made, but it's do you consider the Angevin Empire like a what is it, province state, or do you consider it an empire? Commonwealth, or do you consider it an empire?
That's a great question. I mean, I guess I suppose that it is more like a commonwealth than an empire because there isn't one set of laws that govern the whole thing, right? You've got a family that heads it all up, but the laws of the French lands are obviously going to come under the auspices of the French king as opposed to like whatever the fuck is going on up here, right? And I think that if you've got two sets of laws, more accurately what you're looking at is a commonwealth. If you've got the same head of state but separate legal jurisdictions, then that is probably still a commonwealth. But I don't know if we can ask people to understand. It's a big ask, Come on, like I can barely get people to care about the medieval period. Christ,
Speaking of, and I'm going to again, I'm probably bringing this up a lot, but I want different people's opinion because again, we discussed this privately as well, and I wanted to hear your thoughts on the Byzantine Empire or the East. I know it's kind of not really your area, but or the Eastern Roman Empire, as people prefer to call it these days. Because there are earlier historians, and it's fairly recent phenomena that the Eastern Roman Empire is come in such a spotlight in a way. But what do you feel about the idea, and I call it a Gibbonite idea, that they didn't really contribute anything. They were lazy Greeks, and they were kind of just not really any good to society. Or I mean, let's face it. If you read from history, the Orthodox kind of stopped them from progressing in a way. But what do you think about the idea that the Eastern Roman Empire was not contributing anything to society?
I think that's just ridiculous, right? And I think it's such a okay. So I
So,
find
and
that
again, to reference there, this book is from the 60s, right? So Lord Cantor, for example,
yeah,
believed that they were just lazy Greeks, that they were no good, and that
uh,
they kind of were,
bloody canter.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So what I will say about this is you cannot have it both ways. Okay, because the kind of people who are wanking off about how like the Eastern Roman Empire isn't good and is bad actually are the same people who are like, you know what? I love the Western Roman Empire.
yeah,
It was so good and it fucking rocked and it was
yeah,
excellent. And the Renaissance is definitely real. And
mm,
I love Romans, right? And I'm like, no, you can't do that, right? Because
yeah,
either Empire is good and you like it. You can't just be like, oh, they're speaking Greek now, so I don't like it. And
mm,
it's like they were better at it than the Western Roman Empire,
yeah,
which is why they were still around, right?
yeah,
And so, like, you don't get to be like, oh man, the good old days of like Julius Caesar and then not like Byzantium. You've got
yeah,
to fucking pick, right? And I think that also kind of what happens here, it's like, it's not lazy Greeks, it's like lazy Westerners who are like,
mm,
I don't want to learn Greek.
mm,
Oh, it makes me sad when I have to learn Greek. And it's like these people like spoke Latin and stuff, and there is a fairly lively back and forth with pretty well informed people. But also, say you are in Constantinople, you're going to be much more likely to be like, "Hey, what's going on down in Alexandria? What's going
yeah,
on over in Jerusalem?" Than like, I don't know what's going on over in Rome. And also, every
yeah,
fucking time you talk to Rome, the Pope goes, "Guys, I think I'm in charge." Guys,
yeah,
hello,
yeah,
it's me, the Pope. I'm in charge of you. And they're like, who the fuck are you? You're the Bishop of Rome,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like, I do not care what you have to say. So it's like, why would you
I
face
mean, and
West?
let's face it, Constantinople was the most important city in the world history, and it would
Mm-hmm.
continue to be, even under the Ottoman Empire, it would continue to be the most important city in the world
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and most influential one as
Oh,
well.
for like completely. And it's not even close, right? So, when you are able to kind of like be that focal point of trade, be a really
Yeah,
important place where you have like a back and forth of a lot of different cultures and a lot of different intellectual things, you are very important. And all Norman Cantor is telling you when he says, "Oh, these lazy Greeks," is that he's too lazy to read Greek.
mm,
That's it. That's it. That's on you. That's a
yeah,
skills issue, baby. And it's like most of us have the humility to like put their hands up when we don't speak a language
yeah, and
and
of
not
course
blame a
Gibbon as well.
civilization. Yeah, yeah. I'll fucking give it. Does suck, but
Just
whatever.
throwing that out there.
Yeah, yeah, It's like I'm a lady, so of course I have,
Yeah,
ideas above my station, but
mm.
Mm.
And we got the first female historian from the Western world, of course, as
Mhm.
well from the Eastern world, Anna Komnene, which is total badass.
Right, total badass. And I mean, I just think that the Eastern Roman Empire does a better job actually of taking care of its citizens. I like how they still are giving out grain for a really long time. I
Yeah,
mean, are they fighting a bit of a like ongoing like issue like with the Safavids and then eventually the Ottomans? Sure, but like
yeah,
I don't know, like what's like Western Europe doing that's so good? Like calm down.
yeah.
Like
All they
whatever.
had is the Battle of Tours. I mean, it's not even that important. Let's face it.
No, no. So like I like I don't want to hear it, right?
Yeah.
Like the idea of the Battle of Tours is important. Is just that's revisionist history to make it seem
Let's
like you.
discuss Battle of Tours for just 1 second, because I shared you this book that the and we again we talked about this before, but it's this recent book that called "The Great Heroes Who Defended the West Against Islam,"
Oh,
and
fuck off,
and the
yeah.
Battle of Tours. I mean, and of course again it's Gibbon who believed that it was this we would have Islam in English Channel and the Umayyads in the English Channel, but
Ugh.
I don't think that would be a bad thing. Let's
I'm like,
face it.
oh no,
Yeah,
like what if
I
what if
mean,
there is
let's
really?
yeah, let's face it. Islam in the Middle Ages, they were like they're having the Renaissance way
They're the
before.
cool ones.
They had the Enlightenment 1,000 years before the West
It's
did.
so much
And
better to be a
yeah,
woman under Islam in the Middle Ages than it is to be a woman under Christianity. It is like if what you want is like to progress and be seen as like an individual thinker, you better believe you want to be a Muslim,
yeah.
not a Christian. Like I mean, like just shut the fuck up about things like that. That's
And I
so
mean,
stupid.
the reason we are
Like,
talking right now is because of Islam, right? Because the Abbasid Caliphate and because they're House of Wisdom. I mean, the
yep,
reason that they kind of basically invented algebra in a way, and they are,
yeah,
and because and I still weep when with the Mongol invasion in 1258 when we lost so much scientific work,
mm,
and but it's because of Arab science that we are speaking today, right? That this
mm-hmm.
episode is happening.
Yeah. So it's like I mean that's just a ridiculous thing to say anyway. But like the Battle of Tours, as a result of like this inherent modern chauvinism
Yeah,
about like Islam, is beat up into this thing that's like a really important, and it's like actually just like an individual raiding party like ran into an army and was like, uh-oh. Like
yeah,
this was not a pitched battle. This was like not them like being like, "Hey guys, like go get everyone. We're going to go kick some ass." It was like a wrong turn. Right? And
yeah.
then, Christians beat that up into like, "Oh, magnificent victory. Oh, look
Mm.
at just because it was like the only fucking thing they'd won for a while." So they turned it into like, "Oh, can you like look at what we did. How incredible." Right? And it's like this
Yeah,
is not like it's nothing. It didn't even like occur to the Umayyad Caliphate as like is something to write about, right?
yeah.
This is like exclusively a Frankish beat up.
And I mean the idea that it would be in the British Channel. I mean, come on, probably maybe British Paris, but they probably wouldn't even care to expand that
But
far.
I just don't think they care that much.
Yeah,
Like I think
exactly.
that they were pretty good with their like, no, we're here for Hispania. Thanks. Like I don't really see them being like, yeah, I can't wait to get. Oh, damn, I hear it's drizzling up there. Like I hear they got some sheep. Like I just don't like I don't. And also that was just like a raiding party. It was not like a huge expansionist force moving north. And I think also saying that again betrays like a bit of a modern understanding about how empire worked at the time, right? Where it's like, oh
Mm,
yeah, like it just expands and expands and expands and it eats everyone. And it's like that's not
yeah,
really what they were doing at all. It's just kind of like it was more like, well, we're going around the Mediterranean littoral. We're taking over where Rome used to have.
yeah,
Thank you. Like they don't and no one gave a fact about like what cared at all what was happening in Britannia as a
yeah.
part of that. Even the Romans were like, this is a mistake. Can we leave? Like
Mm.
it's just no.
And I mean, they were still kind of they were pagans until maybe 700s,
Oh
like
god, yeah.
8th century.
Yeah, like I mean, it's just like that's a ridiculous thing to say. So it's like it's you can't you can't have it both ways. You can't be like, oh, this is about like the existential, the about the awful Turk who lusts in his heart for
Yeah,
like expansion or whatever, at like against the good Christian man. And I'm like, but you want to talk about the
mm,
English at this time? There's like 5 Christian dudes up there
yeah.
still. Like I would calm down. I'd calm down personally.
Mm. And I mean, let's face it, by the 1300s, like the Byzantine Empire was pretty much dead at this point. Like,
Yeah,
why
but
would he's already dead? Why would
it's like it's the zombie like the Eastern Roman Empire, and God love them, the little scallywags, like did Romans like or
even the
Venetians?
Western world didn't care at this point.
I mean, they were like Venetians. What did you do? And Venetians are like nothing.
I don't know.
Like and they're like get put that back. Bad Venetians down, but there still was. I mean, obviously the existential crisis we get like 100 years later at the fall,
Yeah,
because it means something to the concept of
yeah,
Christendom, right? Like Christians still want to control that. I think that they were just hoping that like some Venetians would have a better go at it,
yeah.
and like make that stick.
I mean,
But
don't get me wrong. The siege of Constantinople in 1453 is badass, and it's badass to read about.
it's
But
really badass. Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, it kicks a lot of ass. So,
but it's real. They were really dead already by the 14th century. By the turn of the
but that's
14th
how good those
century,
walls
they were
were,
dead.
homie. Like that's
Yeah.
the point. Like those walls were so good. It's like that. Like you could be dead inside there and no one would even know, right? Because like
Versailles walls doesn't work. I'm just
yeah, like
saying.
yeah, you like it's so that there's a lot going on there, right?
Mm.
You know, we
Yeah.
love we in this podcast we simply love the walls of
Oh,
Constantinople.
we
Thank
love
you.
the walls.
Yeah.
We love the walls. They're huge and magnificent. Keep out the
The
imagery.
great walls, okay, best walls I've ever seen. They're saying they're the greatest walls that were ever built.
The cheaper the elements, the deeper the much.
They
But
are. I mean, like the obvious counterpoint to this is the Great Wall of China, and I'm like, yeah, but the Theodosian walls
yeah,
worked,
yeah.
and the Great Wall of China did not. Although the Great Wall of China is cool, we
Yeah,
love it
it's
as
pretty
well.
cool. But it can't be seen for space.
Yeah, yeah,
But
and that's okay.
I want to ask you because and I shared again. I shared you a lot of kind of a few memes when I read books
That's
about
right.
history. But but is there any time you read even primary sources like are there any memes that you find that when you read that this is so it's not even if it's maybe not funny but like are there any meme
Yeah.
something
Oh,
that
yeah.
you read like
Definitely.
when you read like this is definitely a meme like this is so funny.
So I would say I've been doing a lot of like work over on so over for my patrons on my Patreon. We've been reading the introduction to Montague Summers' translation of the Malleus Maleficarum because Montague Summers was such an insane crazy person and I just really feel like people should know about it. And every single time I either read it or The Hammer of Witches, I think about the Simpsons meme that no, dig up, idiot. Like where it's like
Mm,
they're like every time they're like, and this proves it's like it's just not.
yeah.
You just sound crazier. Like the Malleus Maleficarum sounds crazier. You sound crazier for defending it. This is just like you're making it worse. Stop it, right? Like,
I mean, not times in history in this meme, and with again, Barbarossa is one of the biggest memes in its history. I
mm-hmm.
mean, when he went on the third crusade and he drowns in a river, it's already a meme. I mean, come on, he must have
To
been thinking.
me,
Today it sounds like a lovely day to swim. Nothing bad didn't happen to me.
yeah.
It's a meme. Come on.
I mean, that whole man's life was a meme. Like, let's let's just be honest. So, like, I
Yeah.
mean, and it's like a punchline, right? It's like one of the my favorite kind of jokes are like really long-winded stories that kind of seem like they're going nowhere, and then like after someone's made you listen to it for like 5 minutes, there's like the weakest joke you've
Yeah.
ever heard in your life, and to me, that's hilarious,
Yeah.
and that's like what Barbarossa's life was,
Yeah.
right? Like, yeah. Like, I want a really long walk for absolutely no payoff,
Yeah.
which is like what Barbarossa has going on, I would say.
And also you have the Mongol invasion of the
Mm,
Mamluk Empire
hell yeah.
when they kind of if you know anything about Mongol history, their favorite method of warfare was feign retreat, right? So they would fake that they would be retreating and they could do this for days and then the enemy would be like for no I don't know why, but for some reason they would usually chase after the Mongols, and I don't know why they would, but like maybe ask them, but and then suddenly the Mongols would return and just like crush them, and then the Mongols enter the Mamluks realm, and the Mamluks uses the same tactic against the Mongols, and they feign a retreat, and the Mongols just kind of just go along. Oh, they're retreating. That's I never seen that before, and they just go along with it. And some for some reason, and it works. And the Mongols, sorry, the Mamluks, they kind of go after them because they paid with it. It's a meme. Come on, when their own tactics are used against you, and you don't even have a clue, it is
That's
happening.
I love
It's
it.
a meme. Come on.
It's like I love the like inability to do object permanence, you know? It's like, yeah. No one could have possibly learned from me. No way. Not a
Yeah,
chance, homie.
the
No.
ignorance of the medieval era. Let's face it.
Mm.
And something we as well I wanted to bring up is
Mm-hmm.
Ridley Scott movies.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there we go, baby. There we go.
Woo!
In the middle of the video. What are your thoughts with the Scott movies?
Okay, so I've got complex thoughts on this because I quite liked The Last Duel once I saw it.
Mm,
But my thing about Ridley Scott, the problem with Ridley Scott movies is when people think they are historically accurate.
yeah.
Like, I don't have a problem with
No.
people watching and enjoying a Ridley Scott movie. That is totally fine.
Mm,
The trouble is that people don't know a lot about history, like the
yeah.
average people don't. And genuinely, if you come at them with a big enough budget and nice enough costumes, they go, "This is real. I'm doing history now."
Yeah.
Like, I mean, an example of this, like, there's this dumbass kid who was at school with me in Prague, like, just a total moron, right? And like, and he never came to class. And then when he would come to class, he would do things like, I had this one class that was really, really amazing, where basically we just like walked around Prague and looked at things, right? And he showed up to this class maybe 3 times, and he shows up once, and we're like at the church where Mozart used to be the organist. And then he was like, this kid was literally like, didn't Salieri kill Mozart? And it's like, no,
Mm,
that is the plot of Amadeus, right?
yeah.
And like, and now Amadeus is my favorite movie, right? That's my favorite
Yeah.
movie, but it is not a historical
It
document.
made me listen to Salieri more. It's
Yeah,
kudos to Salieri Amadeus.
yeah. Like, I mean, like it's a great movie. I think everybody should watch it right now. I think it's a wonderful meditation on like self-hatred, things of this nature,
Yeah.
right? But it is not a historical document. And the trouble is, my trouble with like The Last Duel, not and this isn't something that like Ridley Scott is attempting to do, but I literally had people come up
Mm.
and try to argue with me about how it is historically accurate. And I'm like, it is not. Like, that's just not true. But they're
Yeah.
like, oh well, it was
It's about
based
Henry
on,
the Fifth, right? If I remember
yeah, and they're like, oh,
correctly.
it's based on this work by a literature professor. I was like, that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Like, that's just like these and so I like those, and I kind of like Ridley Scott's "shut up, nerds" thing to
Yeah.
historians when historians are like, that's not accurate." But I think that that when historians are doing it, it comes from a place of we're worried about the fact that people don't know enough about history, and so they're going to take this movie as historically accurate because the costumes are good. And
Yeah.
Ridley Scott is right; he should just be allowed to play and have a nice time. But like, I think it would be quite funny if you just have like a thing at the beginning of it, which is like, "You dweebs, this isn't real.
Yeah.
This is a movie," right?
So
Mm.
I
Uh,
don't ask about because of course the Napoleon movie that came out last year and it's
mm,
of course was a disaster. And
mm,
I want to discuss the Ridley Scott interview as well. I mean, discussed this a couple of times.
mhm,
But
mhm.
like, what were your thoughts? And of course, Down Snow is a colleague of yours. But what
Yeah,
were your thoughts about the
I didn't.
interview? I really
I
felt sorry for Dan, but in that
Yeah.
interview,
I mean, I think that like poor Dan, God bless my boss, everyone. Hats off to the man who keeps my lights on. Um, but it's just kind of like the trouble is, and also I guess my trouble with Ridley Scott in all of this is you can do the shut up nerds posture more if you're having fun.
yeah,
You can't then take yourself seriously, right? Like, that's the issue. Is it's like you could be like, "Shut up, nerds. No, it isn't historically accurate.
yeah,
Whatever. Like, fuck you." If you're like, "Huh, I know, right?" Like,
yeah,
that's fine, but you can't be like, no, take me very fucking seriously, and take my movie very seriously
yeah,
while also acknowledging it that it's not historically accurate." Like, you can't have both things.
mm,
Or it needs to be that it's kind of a movie about something else, right? Which is like
yeah,
why Amadeus succeeds. Because Amadeus succeeds very much because it's not a movie. Like, I mean, it's like it's got a Mozart soundtrack and whatever, but it's not about Mozart. Like, that's not what this is about. It's
yeah,
about rivalry, and like self-introspection and how the world pans out
yeah,
for the mediocre, right? And so that is what the movie is actually about, and that's why it succeeds. And I don't think that anyone on the press junket for that was going around going, nah, bro, it's totally accurate.
Yeah.
This is what was up, right? Like, first of all, because it was filmed in Prague, not fucking Vienna, right? Like, I mean, so, um, but that's the trouble is that Ridley Scott is not landing this one because he can't lighten up. And the answer either has to be lighten up or don't, you know. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on him saying that only the first books written about someone is worth reading? And I said this before, but I always feel like the further you away is actually better to read than say, or say an example, the Russia-Ukrainian war, like the ones you read about that came out this year or last year about the Russian-Ukrainian war are not necessarily good because there's always a bias about them. If you write a book about the Russo-Ukrainian war, say 20, 50 years from now, it maybe be less biased than, say, what you read about now. Like Sari Forky, for example, I read his book on the subject, and it was so biased, like you could tell he was. And I can't blame him really because he's a pro-Ukrainian, he's Ukrainian himself. But like still, it's you could tell it was just too biased for my taste to but
Well, I mean,
still, what? How do you feel about him saying that only the first two books about something that's written about say Napoleon or Charlemagne are worth reading?
I think that it just shows that you have no fucking idea how history works, right? It's just like the idea that we're never discovering more things
Yeah,
is ludicrous, right? Like the idea that we're never refining the way that we think about things,
mm,
or that we never have like something new to say is completely ridiculous. And like
yeah,
oftentimes like the first book written about someone, you could just throw it out because it's just going to be a
yeah,
hagiography. Like what you can do is you can read that book and be like, this is how people talk about this person. Like you can do historiography on it, but it's usually not that useful as a history because we're going to find more. There's going to be more sources. There's going to be a new way of thinking about things. For example, like just in terms of what we were talking about earlier, you might find that suddenly people start thinking about Muslims as human.
yeah, yeah,
What? And it's like there are plenty of like, ridiculous old school books all about like, the threat of Islam, which it's just like
yeah,
they have no bearing on reality and there's absolutely no fucking reason to read them, right?
yeah.
And
And
you
especially when it comes to America, right? On the 18th, 19th century slavery, like I mean,
mhm. Mhm.
recent books are the best ones to read because you know that it erases prejudice work about these kind of topics. And if you read like even 50 years from now, there's gonna be some agenda that you
Mhm.
have in these works.
And granted, we're all going to have an agenda, right? Like there's no way
Yeah.
to write a perfectly,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
like unbiased history, but it's important to continue to read because the more voices we have and the more that we are getting from new voices in the scene, like that is where you're moving towards accuracy.
Yeah.
That's certainly like not what you're that's certainly not like you can get more
Yeah.
from newer things because we've got new and better perspectives. And I think what he means there is like from a filmmaker's point of view, because then those ones are not complex.
Yeah.
They're just like, and this man was great.
Yeah.
And then he marched here. And it's like, and that makes it really, really easy if what you're trying to do is like tell a very complex story in 3 hours. Right.
And I want to throw it because on the very second, because of the seventh first episode, by the way, if you listen to on YouTube, they are not available because we recorded it through the phone. But anyway, and Aidan Dodson, who's an Egyptologist, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he mentioned that really, in reality, on when it comes to ancient Egypt, the only two first, the only books that came out the last 2 years are worth reading because there's so much new stuff discovered
Mm-hmm.
through archaeology, and there are always new stuff, especially when it comes to Egypt,
Mm-hmm.
that are discovered because so really, if you have a book 5 years ago that should be written about Egypt, it should already be relevant because you have already
Mm-hmm.
so much new stuff that came out about the history of Egypt that should already kind of makes dispute. But and I'm not sure if that's the same in the medieval
No, I
era.
no,
But
I think I think no, this is quite common, and I suppose that, I think that this idea that like, oh, you only have to read like the two oldest history books and that'll tell you,
yeah,
it's also kind of a partially a product of like the modern STEM brain, where it's
yeah,
like where people are like, oh well, technology and science is improving all the time, right? Like that's
yeah.
something that improves and gets better year on year, but the humanities, no. You
Hmm.
can't possibly, there's definitely no more to learn. Like what I learned in year 8 is definitely the thing, and you never have to look into that again. Like, thank you. Right? Whereas it's a live subject and it's constantly changing all the time, and we're constantly having a chance to look at things that we haven't before, or thinking about things new, putting things together in new ways, right? And so you get more things all the time. And like, yeah, there are of course seminal works on certain subjects, but most of the things that I work with are like written in the 90s and forward,
Mm.
because that's when the good stuff starts happening, like.
Yeah, I would ask as well. I'm not gonna keep it too long because we just already it for a long time. But I want, what are your thoughts on people trying to rehabilitate some rulers and kings? Because it's like in ancient times you have these bad rulers that kind of are in trying to be rehabilitated, like Caligula or Nero or
Nero, things like that, yeah.
yeah, or Ivan the Terrible. Maybe not Ivan the Terrible. We made an
Yeah.
episode about him last week a while ago, but she said kind of like, oh, I don't think she's right to try to rehabilitate him, but what are your
Mm.
thoughts on? And again, I'm trying to make this the medieval era. What are your try? What do you think
Ah,
about trying to rehabilitate some rulers that maybe just because they weren't favorable to, say, the Senate or the court, that and
mm.
court historian, that
Yeah,
just, and they write bad because they didn't like them, and they have the power to actually write about them. Well, how do you feel about trying to rehabilitate some rulers, say, for example, Nero or Caligula, or some bad medieval ruler that you touch on to mind?
I think there's always a value in it, because what we're doing there is we're saying, baby, what source sources? Like
Yeah.
you have to take sources and analyze them. You cannot uncritically accept what sources have to say about things, right? Because people get mad and that's why they write things. So, for example, a guy that I'm obsessed with, Frederick II, it's like a lot of sources about him.
Mm.
It's like he was a bad man and he was evil.
My
And
guy
he was
right there.
that's my homeboy.
Yeah,
That's my
bro. Yeah,
homeboy.
Joe.
And I just don't believe a lot of the things they say about him.
Mm.
Like, and because
I mean, he just got a bad rep with the Pope, and
yeah, and then here's a bunch of priests being like, "Oh yeah, and he was torturing babies. I saw
yeah.
him torturing babies." And there, it's like, was he, bro? Like, it just doesn't seem like
I don't know.
I don't know, but it's just that one guy saying that, and that guy's pissed.
Yeah,
So, like, so I think that there is a value to it in terms of the fact that we should always be trying to work with audiences to be like, you have to interpret sources. This is why historians exist, because you can't just read something and go, "Oh, that's true."
yeah,
Right. I also think there's a value in it in terms of certain things. So, for example, I think the current reevaluation of my boy Temujin, aka Genghis Khan, has been
yeah,
important, because I think for like way too long, everyone is just like, "Oh, he was just an inhuman monster," and it's like, as opposed to
yeah.
Alexander the Great,
But
right?
to interrupt you again, we made an episode about him a while ago with Maurice Rosabi, and he mentioned that he was actually more interested in administration of his empire
Mm-hmm.
than actually conquering and raping people than
Oh
he's
god,
made
yeah, and
out to
it's
be.
like that's the thing, is that like he very much like when the Mongols would roll up under him, they're like, "You want to get amalgamated into this trade block?" And if you're like, "Yeah," they were like, "Nice.
Yeah,
Here's your administrators. Moving on," right? And if you were like, "No, we'll fight you to the death," they'd be like, "Okay, I guess you
yeah,
will. Now you're all dead." Like, right? And it's like, granted, it's diplomacy on a freaking sword's edge. I'm not saying that it was nice, but it's not like they were bloodthirsty and they were just out there like
yeah,
killing for fun or something like that. And I think that it's interesting just like that until recently, we'd be like, oh, Alexander the Great. Like it's really cute
Yeah.
when he does it. But like the minute a Mongolian does it, it's like, oh, the horror.
Yeah.
What a terrible man, right? And so I think that reevaluations like that are incredibly important for us to kind of like
That's bringing me
going
up to
to.
the next point, because I had a discussion a while ago with a friend of mine, and we discussed like the great really feel like it's just more like European thing, because we wouldn't put like Genghis Khan the Great, or Tamerlane the Great, or any ruler whatever, Kublai Khan the Great, because he's Asian. It's more like a white kind of
Yeah.
king, like Peter
Yeah.
the Great or Edward the First.
Catherine.
Catherine the
Yeah.
Great, because
Yeah.
there's white people, they deserve the title Great, but like say Genghis Khan. And we kind of discussed how you just deserve the title Great because you killed and murdered a lot of people. That's why you're called Great.
100%. 100%. It's about kill count.
Yeah.
So yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And
The greats for the white people. What can I say?
which brings me up to my next point. I mean, you kind of mentioned this already, but just because you're great or good doesn't mean you're necessarily nice. Because, like you said earlier today, like no real good king was nice or friendly.
No.
It was, and again, we discussed this in the I'm a Terrible episode as well, because it was kind of a lonely position to be a king, and it wasn't a very you can it wasn't you had to be nasty in some points.
Yeah, I mean, I think you'll find that whenever you meet a king that is truly nice, he will then be described as weak. And what ends up happening is that will get taken advantage of, and your kingdom will be chipped away at, if not from the outside, from the inside.
Yeah. If I made it's getting a little dark on your side, if you can turn on the lights.
Yeah, hold on one second. Yeah, I gotta let my cat out too because she's mad. What can I say?
So yeah, like you weren't really necessarily a nice person just because you were called good or the nice.
Yeah, like, and there are nicer kings or whatever, but fundamentally, in order to be successful within this construct, it is one of violence. So, like, I mean, the monarchy is a violent institution. So, and there's no sugarcoating that, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, even if you're like, I'm like, of course, the quote unquote good king that I think of is my boy Wenceslaus or Voxlov, the saint. Even though he's a duke, not a king, but like whatever. But who cares? And it's like, oh, the good Venceslaus, the good that he's often like called, and all these things. Yeah, and he got killed by his fucking brother, right? Like, who is like, you were spending too much time doing God stuff and giving to the poor.
Yeah.
Like it's like, guess what? Like being a duke is about knifing people in the back. So like that's what's up, right?
Yeah. And as in Norway, we have just one saint here in Norway so far, and it's called Saint Olav. I'm not sure if you are
Yeah.
you don't know him. And let's be fair, in reality, it was Olav Tryggvason, the predecessor who was Christianized Norway, but Saint Olav gets the credit for it. But he even the first time around when he came to Norway, he was like butchering and killing pagans, the Charlemagne way, to put it that way. And he wasn't really a nice guy either, and he became a saint. So there's that.
Yay. So yeah, like it just all depends on who's asking, right? And we got to understand that like saints and kings all come from the same echelon of society, and they're not nice people, you know.
Which brings me to I want to ask you: is there, when you read a lot of history, and when you read other historians' work, are you kind of judgy? Are you kind of like reading from a professional point of view, or are you more like enjoying a casual reading, or are you kind of, oh well, this didn't happen. I don't
Well,
know. Do you really believe that, or are you?
I guess if I'm
How
like
how do you read other historians of the period that you study? Kind of how are you
Okay, that I
judgmental or
study.
are
All right,
you?
yeah, because if I'm reading outside of my period, I'm usually just like, yay,
Yeah,
I'm having a nice time, right? Like provided it's written sparkly enough. Um, I tend to try to approach every single thing that I read from a place of yay,
yeah,
because someone's worked really hard on it and they're putting their heart and soul into it. And fundamentally, actually, even if I really dislike a particular bit of work, there's usually at least something good in it. So there's always
mm,
like something for you to read that you can kind of like pick out of it and go, okay, well, this is something to play with, or here's an idea. But also, I think that the quite a few of the people who are working today are, just very, very talented. I think that
yes.
we're in a really great time for history,
Oh
and
yeah.
I think that a lot of it is written very well. It's very well researched, and we're very lucky that a lot of what hits the shelves, I think, is quite impactful and good. So, I mean, I try to just have a little bit more fun with it, and I try not to be too hypercritical unless I've been hired specifically
Mm,
to, if I've been hired specifically to review a book, I'll be a bit more critical. But having said that, I often read books where I'm just like, this is awesome. And like
mm,
a lot of the time, my criticisms boil down to, I wish there was more, or I wish you talked about X
yeah,
thing that wasn't in there
yeah.
because I think it would be interesting to see you apply that to that. But if
I
my
mean,
criticism is
yeah.
I would like more, then
I mean, I'm not a
there's not a
historian, and I
problem.
100% agree with you. Like, I feel that sometimes. Yeah,
Mm,
but I discuss we I love discussing women and women's history on this podcast. I feel like recently, as you said, there's kind of a golden age
mm-hmm,
era for women's history in that time we live in. Like we have recently the waiting game, for example, of the women who served the Tudor queens. For example, that's one that you one mentioned, like
mm-hmm,
it's also a great time, and we have the Cleopatras by Lloyd Llewyn Jones, who came
mm-hmm,
out
mm-hmm.
recently as well, which focused on the Cleopatra side of the Ptolemaic history. So we have a lot of, and for women's history as well, it's really progressed a lot than, let's say, for the 60s, 70s, or earlier. That I
Mm-hmm.
feel as well. It's been a lot of focus on recently. So we live in, I would kind of say we are living kind of a golden age of history right now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, there's a lot of work being done on the Tudor women. I wanted to shout out my friend Isabel Peronk's work on that. Her work is really incredible, especially her recent one that is about Catherine de Medici. I think it's called Thorns, Lust, and Glory. Anyway, it's amazing. It's about Elizabeth the First and
Yeah,
Catherine de Medici's relationship. Very, very excellent. I think also the one on the Empress Theodora. I think it's called Theodora. Empress Hustler Whore is excellent. Really good piece of work there.
mm,
There's a lot of really exciting stuff happening in the field, and I think that's excellent. I mean, from an academic standpoint, also I want to shout out my boy Jamie Page's work.
yeah,
Um, and he wrote a really incredible academic book on sex workers.
yeah,
And I'm trying to get the thing right. It's like it's a prostitution and subjectivity in late medieval Germany, and it is so fucking good. It is such a fucking incredible piece of work. Where I was just reading it, going, "Holy shit, dude! This is
yeah.
groundbreaking." And so even though it's academic, if you can track it down, like get it from a library or something, like if you want to see some source work, bro, like incredible intellect, really really talented guy, and it's really nice to hear from sex workers, so yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
And as well, we have all these empresses that lived, and it's Maria Theresia, one Barbara Rillinger. She wrote an excellent book on Maria Theresia. I think it's maybe, I think it's quite old, but I think it's, I'm not sure, 10 years ago or 5 years ago.
Mm,
I'm not sure, but she wrote an excellent book on Maria Theresia, for example. But it's there's so much work being done recently on women's role in
Mm-hmm.
society. And your book, of course, the Ones of Future Sex,
The
of course,
ones of intersex,
which I'm
yes.
holding up right here.
Hey, that's right.
It's
You know that's right.
there's a lot of incredible work in done in general in history and as well on Eastern Roman historical Delhi. So I'm going to.
Mm-hmm.
I think it will be before this episode comes out that we will have a episode on the Eastern Roman Empire as a whole.
Cool.
So it's there's a lot of work being done recently on history. That's but before I end, is there anything? We're going to end soon. I'm sure. I
Yeah,
promise
it's
you.
probably
But
time. I should,
but
I should probably eat, bruh.
is is there
What's
any?
3 GNTs on an empty stomach between
It's
friends?
we just had 2 hours left.
I know, right? Oh,
It's
damn.
but how history changed your life? And I mean, not just from professional standpoint, but is there anything that you take from, is there, and how has history changed your life in a way you see the modern world, and how is there anything any way that you know?
Yeah, I'm hyper analytical. So, like, a thing that this has been good for, in the internet age is I never believe anything that's written just because it's
Oh yeah,
written down, right?
yeah,
And which can make you feel like you're taking crazy pills,
mhm,
anymore because people have been taught that like anything that is written down is accurate, and you're like,
yeah,
no, the whole time. But it's an incredible skill for life, right? So, like my ability to take in information from several sources and synthesize it into something useful really comes in handy
mm,
quite often, right? It's the power of noticing
yeah,
right? So there's like a lot of that, and it's I think that's a good thing, and like one of the great things that history can do in general is teach people the importance of that. And
mm,
that's why it's all about source analysis, baby, and you can do it at
yeah.
any time. So yeah. Yeah.
Now I wanted to say a little bit ranting for the end because we are going to end soon, but I want to rant a little bit
Go on.
because there is something about the recent events in UK that happened a while ago, and I know you're sure that I'm talking about, and I want to mention this because I feel like it's important to bring up, and I'm not sure many listened this far in the episode, and I'm not even sure how long we recorded, but like
Mm.
I want to bring up immigration because
Mhm.
I think immigration is important to society. And yes, I think I should add this by the way because I know there's a few people on my especially YouTube channel who feels probably going to disagree on this, but I
Mm.
feel like immigration is important, and I feel like
Mm.
it should be yes, it should be controlled. It should be somewhat legal, but we need immigration, and I think we need I think we need it both because of culture and not just how it's
Mhm.
changed our society. Because immigrants, as far as I know, I lived and worked in UK before the pandemic, right?
Mm.
I worked in a warehouse where it's you can guess what? Just how many low British people worked in a warehouse where I worked.
Mhm.
Try,
Mhm.
try to try to guess.
Okay, it's gonna be low because British people never
Yeah,
do. It's gonna be like fewer than 20.
it was zero.
Fuck
And
off.
mostly it was Romanians who didn't even speak English because and at the end this comes from a historical side because in Bergen we had the Hanseatic League, right?
Mhm.
And they were
Mhm.
mostly Germans, and they lived in German quarters. They lived in the didn't really in some few did, but they mostly lived in say close quarters where Germans spoke Germans and they married with other German
Mhm.
people.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
And this is true in today's London, especially because
Yeah.
it's Romanian people that usually live with other Romanian people.
Yeah.
And I usually work with Indian or Romanian people in the warehouse that I used to work on. And it was kind of job that were British people. They came for one day, a few hours maybe, and then they quit because
Mhm.
they felt that the job was beneath them.
Mhm.
And again, this goes to show that, like, well, when you say that the immigrants take the work that British people should have, you wouldn't even last a minute if you tried to do the work immigrants do. Like, let's be honest, and this is facts from experience. Like, hotels, who do the cleaning jobs? The immigrants. Who do the taxi jobs? Immigrant Uber. That is immigrants. And who does the picking of
Picking
field?
fruits.
Yeah, the
Who does the
potatoes,
nursing in the
harvesting,
NHS?
etc.,
Like,
etc. That is immigrants. So if you, and they do pay, immigrants mostly are, with the exception to a friend of mine. This is just a shout out. That's just a joke, but it's immigrants are the hardest working people you will find. And yes, they pay
Mhm.
tax as well as they send money home to their families because they want to support and help their families back home. That's why they're
Mhm.
taking these jobs, because, and that's why they work. They are some of the hardest working people
Mhm.
that I personally have met and that I have known. So it is from experience. We need immigration, and we need, and all the awesome
Mhm.
culture that we have. And of course,
Yeah.
let's face it, kebab, because of, immigrants and gyros, or
Mhm.
whatever, So if without, we need immigration, and yes, it should be controlled, it should be somewhat legal, but without it, where would what kind of jobs would be the jobs you think that they're taking is not really what you think they are taking.
I
So
mean, like, yeah, yeah. So, like, well, in the first place, like, obviously, I'm an immigrant, so
yeah,
like, you're not gonna. I'm like, I think I should be allowed to be here, and I think and I pay my taxes and I contribute to society and I'm a part of my community and blah blah blah. And like, what I always say about these things is like, you're bang on about like immigrants are doing a lot of work that British people don't want to have. We basically don't have a problem with
yeah,
unemployment in this country. We don't. We're at full employment. There are more jobs than there are people that need doing. It's like there's no immigrant taking your job because you can have a job at
yeah,
any time you fucking want. You just don't want that, and you don't want that job anyway. And
mm,
what it just kind of betrays is like a desire for this work to be done by invisible people. Like they just don't want it to be like they don't want to have to see this kind of like section of society. And I would say that it's part of like the long con of how life works here, where it's like immigrants are not your enemies. And
mm,
immigrants are not the reason why your life sucks. I'll tell you why your life sucks, rich people. Your life
mm,
sucks because like 10 guys in the entire world have about 90% of all the money. And that's why
yeah,
shit sucks for you. And it has absolutely nothing to do with immigrants. It has to do with a bunch of rich guys that don't pay their taxes. And every single time something sucks, it is as a result of that. Like, it
yeah.
just flat out, like, and it's not even a secret. But what they've managed to do is say, oh, yeah, like all the other people, that's what the problem
The
is.
scapegoat, the good old
And
classic scapegoat.
we are all so much closer to being a migrant worker in a country where we don't speak the language
Yeah,
and taking whatever fucking job we can get than we ever are to be a
yeah,
billionaire whose fucking $8 billion
yeah.
yacht just sank. Right.
And
And
for example, take a look at the Russo-Ukrainian war, but people complaining about the Ukrainian community. How would you fucking feel if your country were invaded?
yeah,
And how
yeah,
would you fucking feel if you had to run away somewhere and didn't feel welcome?
yeah. And it's like, bro, the enemy does not arrive by vote. He arrives by limousine.
Yeah,
And like that's where you need to fucking focus your energy. And all this shit about like no-go zones and like blah blah blah. All of that is a lie and not real. And also like I think that there's a real sexist undertone to a lot of this because they're always talking about like our women and how you have to like, oh, we've got to save our women. Shut the fuck up. I don't want you saving
yeah.
me. And I don't belong to you. And also the thing you're talking about is not fucking real. So
Mm,
like grow up, be nice to people, organize and tax the rich. The end.
mm.
That's it.
I think we done round it up there. It was a nice little rant where, of course, where can people buy your books? They want us
You,
to search Joan
you
Medieval and Women's
yeah,
Society.
yeah,
Where
yeah.
can people find it?
You can
Of
buy
course,
that anywhere
yeah.
good books are sold. It's also available now in paperback, so it's much less expensive. It
Ooh.
also is out in several languages, so it's out auf Deutsch now as a Die de la Frau. And it is going to be out in Russian, I believe. It's going to be out in Polish
Oh, even
soon.
Russian. That's kind
Russian,
of
yeah.
controversial.
You know, like, hey, baby, like they have
Gotta make those big bucks.
So Polish, German. Still waiting for my Spanish edition. Where's it at? Where's it
No
at?
sabe, no, yo no sabe.
Yeah. So,
¿Por qué?
¿por qué no?
No, no
Like,
sabe.
yeah. And, also, they my chisque. But, like, I want to know. I want to.
Y
But,
portugués no, no, portugués versión no.
yeah, it's hard out here. But yeah, you can get it wherever good books are sold. So yeah, it is out there in the world waiting
Do you
for
have
you.
anything else you want to share? Anything on social media where people might find you
Yeah,
for other
you can.
impressions?
I am not very often on Twitter anymore because of the unpleasantness, but I do show up.
Mm.
My at is at Going Medieval. I'm on Blue Sky more often, where my at
Oh.
is at goingmedieval.bsky.com. I'm on Instagram as Dr. Eleanor Janega, all lowercase because some bitch ass bitch got Going Medieval before I got to it. And my blog is going-medieval.com. And you can check out my podcasts, We're Not So Different, and also Gone Medieval. So yeah.
Well, of course, co-host, and we had, if I may say so, we had him on the podcast as well, Matthew Lewis.
We love Matt. We love Matt. That's my
And
boy.
this has been with that as well. You can find us on social media, on the Twitter, well, under with that age as well. You know, on Instagram as well, under with that age as well. We are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you can find podcasts. If you're on Spotify, consider giving us 5 stars. That would be very nice. You can also
That's
give us
right.
one. If you hated this episode, you can give us 1 star. But if you're nice with one, it's a free country, at least this part of the world. If you are on Apple Podcasts, consider writing a review. That would be very nice. We love reading reviews here, and of course, if you are on YouTube, like, share, and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Check out some other episodes as well. We, Eleanor and Janega, have been around here 3 times now. You can check out the episode where we discuss her book, The Once on Future Sex, of course, in episode 123. And I believe episode 180 something as well. And this is just misconception about medieval history. This
Yeah.
is about drunk history. I would say once again, cheers. And
Cheers.
I'll see you next time.